Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and Czech light tanks are going to be arriving in the next update 1.26, and in today's video I'm going to let you know exactly how to prepare and whether you should be excited about them. So without further ado, exactly how much experience do you need to be able to get the Škoda T17 on day one? Well, that is 50,750. So make sure you uncheck accelerated crew training in your Škoda T25, which is a great tier 6 medium tank, and earn that 50,750 so that you can get the Škoda T17 on day one. Alternatively, if you're a whale, then maybe don't bother and just blueprint your way through the Škoda T25 to be able to get to the Škoda T17. So once you finally got the tier 7 Czech light tank, is it an exciting vehicle to have inside your garage? What does it look like? Yeah, it's always fun to be able to get the first of a new line to get an idea of how it might play. But oh my word, just what is this monstrosity? Kind of looks like the hull of a Škoda T50 with the turret of like a TVP, almost like a heavy tank just welded on top. And trust me, that is not a good thing for the hull, and probably also not for the turret. This looks like a gigantic tier 7 light tank, at least from this perspective, and it looks like it could be really hard to be able to hide this thing in bushes. If we take a look to see how the Škoda T17 compares with an equal amount of view to an AMX 1375, yeah, we can see this is the vehicle that ate all the bookie, I guess. This one has been slamming drinks for the most part of its life. It is a very tall tank, and I can only imagine how easy it will to be able to hit this thing from the side compared to a variety of other lights. When you also factor in the fact that it has absolutely no armor, yeah, you might want to take out some tier 6 or tier 7 derp tanks to be able to feast on these on day one, trust me. So just what does Wargaming have to say about the Škoda T17? Well, at the end of World War II, the Czechoslovak army had a motley fleet made up of Soviet, German, British and American armored vehicles. This made it difficult to use the vehicles and to assign them to troops. The decision was made for Czechoslovakia to return developing its own tanks, since the nation had a great deal of experience from the war. Besides the development of medium tanks, projects for light ones started too. In close cooperation with the Military Technical Institute, the Škoda Construction Bureau began work on a project for the Škoda T17 tank. It had a hull and a turret that were reminiscent of the Soviet IS-3 heavy tank. Big eyebrow raised there from me. The vehicle was supposed to have a decent armor for a light tank and a 75mm gun. It was planned to install a more powerful 500 horsepower engine, but for various reasons the project went no further than blueprints, and developing a medium tank became a priority. Okay, so how bad is this thing going to be stock? Is it going to be playable? Oof, that really doesn't look like a very good gun for a stock tier 7 light tank. Here's the gun that you just had on the tier 6 medium, and you've got way less alpha, less pen, less damage per minute, worse accuracy, better aim time. But to be fair, you do carry more rounds in the magazine, 5 instead of 3. But really, that doesn't look like it's going to be a very good time. At the very least, you're going to have to spam a lot of gold, and that's praying that you don't get into a tier 8 or tier 9 game. So what is my recommended upgrade path for this tank? Well, turret, then the gun, then the engine, then the tracks will be the best way to sort this vehicle out. And once you've done all of that, does it look any different at all? Well, yeah, the turret goes from looking more like a TVP turret to more like a stock Škoda turret. I mean, just look at this thing. This is the Škoda T50. This is the Škoda T17. It's just a smaller version of the Škoda T50, which I guess is not unusual when you're taking a look at the difference between mediums and light tanks, but considering how much of a gigantic vehicle this is at tier 9, this is not a small tank at tier 7, especially for lights. Okay, so once you've got this thing upgraded, what is there to look forward to on it? Well, the gun, at least it's now playable. That is a much better gun than you had when it was stock. You've got just benefits all the way across the sky. 100 alpha, 5 rounds in the magazine, that's 500 damage per magazine. 1,731 damage per minute is not bad. 0.4 accuracy, 2 seconds aim time, but 1.33 seconds intra-clip reload. That's not bad, but when you also factor in that that's still only going to have like 200 alpha damage for 2.66 seconds, yeah, it feels a little bit low compared to some other autoloaders. And if we take the Škoda T17 and we compare it to an MX 1375, for example, we see it has a DPM advantage, much less alpha, however, a comparatively better intra-clip reload. But when we take a look at it, the AMX 1375 bursts out 540 in 6 seconds, whereas this tank is going to do 505.33 with more rounds having to go at the target. The The gun handling is significantly worse than the 1375, but it does get better gun depression. It is significantly slower than the 1375, with way worse armor that's going to get overmatched left, right, and center. And the vehicle has comparable camo rating, which is a bit of a head scratcher in a way, considering how much bigger this tank is than the 1375. It seems a bit weird that Wargaming would give it exactly the 1375 camo. It's almost as if they kind of took the French light tank here as the baseline and decided how they could change the stats just enough to get away with it inside World of Tanks. So all in all, in this vehicle, as long as you can remain hidden, it shouldn't be too bad. But I don't think it's going to be anything special inside World of Tanks. And it doesn't have the new autocannon mechanic. So let's jump up to the Blesk and take a look to see whether the Blesk is going to have the auto gun mechanic. And the answer is yes, right from the get-go. Before then, let's take a look to see what this tank looks like when it's stock. Wow, that is a very weird tank. It almost looks to me like it's more of a tier 2 tank that's just been bulked up on scale. That angling on the front hull, if it's got any kind of armor, looks like it could be a good ricochet opportunity. The stock turret just looks hilarious. It just doesn't look like it would have been a real vehicle. But I guess that's why this is just a blueprint tank. So how bad is the Blesk going to be stock? Well, we've got big things to talk about, because even stock, this is going to be the first autocannon that you use in World of Tanks. So things are going to get a little bit weird. So it has 4 average damage on its standard shells, 3 average damage on its premium shells, and 8 average damage, I forgot how many fingers I have, 8 average damage on its high explosive rounds. So this is going to boggle a lot of people's minds when we take a look at the ammo. So this tank can literally load thousands of shells, but it can go through them in quick succession because every single magazine that this vehicle fires is going to be 200 shells per magazine with a 20-second load time. So you can get through literally hundreds of shells per minute in these new autocannons. So the next thing to talk about is that Wargaming have made the prices of these shells identical, at least for these stock guns. Each shell costs 5, so there is no more gold rounds, at least with regards to the Czech light tanks. It's just standard ammunition prices across the board for the APCR and the HE. So this is a very interesting balancing mechanic that a lot of people have been asking right from the beginning, that why don't gold shells just do less damage if they have more penetration? And while that will cause massive issues if you employ that across the entirety of World of Tanks, maybe Wargaming can balance a new line around that. Accordingly, this means that considering this gun is going to be firing 200 shells per magazine, this vehicle is going to be capable of, is that 800 damage per magazine on the standard rounds, 600 on the premium rounds, and if it's able to penetrate every single one of its HE shells, unless I'm making a mistake here, that stock gun is capable of 1,600 damage, although only against the lightest of targets with 30mm of pen. And no, it doesn't look like I'm making a mistake here. So this thing, the Blesk, if it manages to penetrate all of those shells, is going to be able to take out the entirety of a Borask, for example, in a matter of seconds. However, this is where things get a little bit confusing. How quickly does this thing unload? Well, it has a rate of continuous fire of 3,000 rounds a minute, which means that it's going to be firing, unless my math is off, 50 rounds a second. So considering it's dealing 50 rounds a second, then that means that it's doing 200 damage per second. This means that it's going to take 4 seconds of continuous fire to completely drain the magazine. That is not bad. 800 damage in 4 seconds is not bad at all. These things are going to be pretty voracious with their ability to burst out. If this is the tier 8 stock gun, let's hope that things are going to get even better. The real problem that I'm seeing is how are you really meant to penetrate 151mm at tier 8? 199 gold? It's not bad for a tier 8 light tank, but it's definitely not good. And 30mm of HE pen, unless they pen, they're going to be doing practically nothing to the enemy tanks. Nevertheless, this is a playable stock gun. It won't just be useless, it will be playable. But that decision to load gold instead, you up your pen by 1/3, but you're going to lower your magazine damage by a quarter while also costing no more because the shells cost the same amount. It's going to actually have to be a tactical decision rather than a pay-to-win decision, making these autocannons very interesting indeed. Okay, so what is my recommended upgrade order for this vehicle? Well, I'd probably recommend to get the gun, then I'd recommend to get the turret, then you get the engine, then you get the tracks. Let's take a look to see what this vehicle looks like now. So pretty much the same, apart from now the turret looks a little bit more modern. And again, the back of it kind of reminds me of a Polish medium with the way the back bows out. So just what has happened to the gun? And I wonder if that top turret is going to change the way that the stock gun works. Doesn't look like it changes it too much. So what's this new 37mm going to be like? Wow, so the alpha damage is increased by 50% to 6. On the gold rounds, it's only increased by 25% to 4 though. So that means the disparity now between the regular rounds and the gold rounds is significantly higher. Now you're going to be losing a third of your damage if you elect to fire gold, whereas on the previous stock gun you're only losing a quarter of your damage. And man, if you can penetrate those HE shells, you are now doing 12 damage. But interestingly enough, the amount of shells that you've got in the magazine have gone down. You've only got 140 shells in the magazine now. So if you've got 140 times by 6, that means you've got an 840 magazine, just a little bit bigger than the stock gun. However, I'm pretty sure that means that now you're going to actually do less damage with gold than you were previously. On the stock gun with gold, you actually do 600 damage per magazine. However, with gold on the upgraded gun, you're actually going to do 560, so slightly less. And I'm pretty sure the same is going to be said for the HE rounds as well, where we take 12 and we times it by 140. You're going to do 1,680, so it's actually just a little bit more with regards to the gold ammunition. Sorry, the HE rounds there. You're going to have 80 more damage. So all in all, that gun looks like it's an upgrade, maybe slightly worse for just spamming gold, but better for the other two for magazine damage. But one thing that's very interesting here is that we see the rate of continuous fire has changed from 3,000 to 2,100. And so accordingly, it is going to take, or I guess I should first work out what is your rate of fire. Your rate of fire has gone down to 35 per second rather than 50. And so that means that now we are going to take 4 seconds to deliver a magazine, which is obviously the same that it was previously. So we can see that Wargaming really want this tank to change just a little bit, but practically remain the same once you've got those gun upgrades. The only real advantage here is that you do have the better penetration. But it's very interesting to me that Wargaming have pretty much just not made that much of a difference once you get the upgraded gun on this vehicle. I would still recommend getting that upgraded gun so you can have that extra penetration on your standard rounds for the better magazine damage in exactly the same time. But this is not a huge step up in gun performance. So that's why I was thinking this tank was going to be a lot better than it actually will be, considering how good that stock gun is. So Wargaming decreasing the disparity between guns and also making it so that gold rounds have a disadvantage as well as an advantage. And we can't really call them gold rounds anymore on this vehicle. We're going to have to call them premium rounds or special rounds. It's really interesting stuff there. Now, the thing that we have to talk about with this vehicle is how much of a step up is it going from tier 7 up to tier 8. Well, your damage per minute has gone up, your penetration has gone up, but considering you're using an autocannon now, whereas previously you were using like an autoloader, they're not really too comparable. Your aim time's not great, your accuracy's not great, your gun handling's pretty okay, your bloom after firing has got worse than the previous tank, but it's still okay. 10 degrees of gun depression is lovely. You're much faster with better ground resistances. You've got no armor, hardly any hit points compared to the previous tank, and your camo rating has actually gone up. Wow, that's really good news for this vehicle. It's a shame that the view range isn't great, so you're still going to have to use coated optics, but considering how good the camo is, that is actually looking like it could be quite a savage vehicle. Let's take a look at the moving camo of all of the tier 7 light tanks. And we see that that tier 8 light tanks, and we will notice that the Blesk has exactly the same camo rating as the T92, which is not bad at all. It's not going to be close to vehicles like the ELC, significantly worse than the EBR, but this is not bad camo on the Blesk, and you are going to be able to be quite sneaky in World of Tanks. So all in all, this vehicle looks like it is going to have a tremendous amount of firepower, and its camo rating is not going to be bad at all. I think this will be a proficient tank. The only thing that really worries me about the Blesk is just its absolute utter complete lack of armor, but that does, and a quite large hull size, which will make it an easy shot. but that doesn't really hold back every vehicle inside World of Tanks. So something to get excited about. The Blesk doesn't look too bad. Doesn't look great, but it doesn't look too bad. Okay, now we're going to have a look at the Šelma. This is the Tier 9 Czechoslovakian light tank, and the Šelma, wow, this thing looks weird. The turret on the back looks so much like a Leopard prototype, and also the back of the hull, it looks very much like a German design as well. Let's do a little bit of a read about the Šelma, see what Wargaming has to say about it. So the LPT-67 Šelma, a Czechoslovakian light tank, was a variant of a German Sperrpanzer concept. Well, that would make sense considering the way that the tank looks. The hull layout was similar to the Soviet PT-76B and BTR-50 vehicles, and the frontal armor was reinforced. Use of a powerful diesel engine was planned to ensure the necessary mobility. An original chassis was also used. It had 6 single support rollers, 3 support wheels each side, and telescopic energy-rich hydraulic shock absorbers. Given the tank's high-speed characteristics, mounting a 50 or 57mm coaxial auto-loading guns provided good firepower. The project was discontinued for technical and economic reasons. The tank was not amphibious and could not withstand helicopters or assault aircraft, and it was too expensive to produce. So how bad is this thing stock? Let's take a look at this gun. Again, it doesn't look that bad. It's a 50mm compared to the 37 that you had on the previous tank. Its alpha damage is up, but its magazine is down. The rate of continuous fire is down as well. The average damage per minute's up, however, but its gun handling doesn't look like it's great. Penetration-wise, it's not worse than the previous tank, but it's definitely not that much better. This is a Tier 9 light tank, and good blooming luck trying to pen 173mm on many tanks, and 222 even of the gold, where you have to lose that alpha damage. It's going to take me a while to not say gold rounds. The premium rounds, 222 just doesn't feel great. And then you lose like a quarter of your damage per minute if you do that, and you're going down to 1,500. It's not bad, but it's definitely not great news. Okay, let's fully upgrade this tank. I'm going to go with the tracks, then I'm going to go with, the turret, and go with the gun, then I'm going to go for the engine, then I'm going to go for the tracks on this vehicle. Let's take a look to see what it looks like now. So the turret, again, has now changed from being what looked like German to now being more like Polish with the box on the back of the vehicle. And let's take a look to see how good this 57mm is compared to the 50mm. Okay, so the pen has gone up quite significantly. Again, the amount of shells in the magazine has gone down again, whereas the continuous fire has gone down as well, but the DPM is overall up. So we're seeing this kind of trend that actually the Blesk had really good damage per magazine with that stock gun, and the higher we go up this tech tree, the kind of like the less, or the amount of damage per magazine is equaling out, but the overall damage per minute is increasing because of the alpha damage that we're getting for all of the shells. So let me just quickly calculate what the magazine damage is on this tank. So 100 shells, so it's obviously 800. So that's pretty much the same as it was at Tier 8. And if we take a look at the upgraded gun here, it's going to be 900 damage per magazine with, if you can penetrate the AP shells, and if you can go through with the premium shells on this tank, then of course it's going to be 9 times by 75, so 675 for the premium shells on this tank. If you're able to penetrate HE, however, you have 24 average damage. That is going to be 1,800 damage per magazine if you can manage to pen with 50mm. And I think that will be possible for quite a few targets, making these tanks absolutely terrifying against lightly armored vehicles. So artillery, light tanks, lightly armored mediums, Borasks, Char 75s, those kind of things, they are going to be absolutely torn apart by the Šelma if the Šelma can penetrate those 50mm of pen. Absolutely terrifying that this vehicle's damage per minute literally doubles up to like 5,000 if you're able to penetrate those HE shells. You go from being kind of like a nasty medium if you're penetrating your AP down to more of like a low damage heavy tank if you're penetrating your gold. But if you're penetrating your HE, you might as well be like the creme de la creme of the highest echelons of tank destroyer damage per minute. All in all, an absolutely terrifying prospect to play against. But let's take a look at the other statistics of the Šelma, because it's not going to matter if it doesn't also have good stats in other areas. So that damage per minute is up, pen is up a little bit. Still not great pen for tier 9. Let's not think about anything otherwise. The aim time is better, but it's good. The accuracy is better, but not good. The gun handling is improved a little bit, but you've only got 7 degrees of gun depression now. That really sucks for the Šelma. You're not really fast. Your power to weight is good, but you're not fast, so definitely improve the top speed limit with crew skills like engineering and also with the field mod. You don't have that many hit points for a tier 9 light tank, so you're quite fragile with horrendous armor that's going to get penetrated by HE rounds. I expect there's going to be a lot of check-on-check action, and your camo rating has gone down back to what it was at tier 7, but it's not exactly disastrous. The thing that really sucks, however, is that view range. 380 means that you're going to have to use coated optics on this tank. And you don't want to use coated optics on a tier 9 light tank, especially on, should we say, those more close quarters maps where you still need a little bit of view range. Maps like Runeberg, for example. But if you don't take coated optics even on your damage build, you are going to suffer on this vehicle. So all in all, honestly, with how fragile they are and how many hit points they have and how their lack of top speed and the not excellent gun handling statistics, I don't think the Šelma is going to be that good at tier 9. I'm hoping that this gun is going to get better when we jump up to tier 10. That just remains to be seen. So that's the Šelma. All right, so ladies and gents, boys and girls, it's time to reach the top of the tree and play the Tesák. So the Tesák, let's read a little bit about it. So an option for developing light tanks projects with versatile armament, including double-barreled auto-loading guns. The vehicle was designed for a scope of tasks that was as broad as possible. It was both a fast, maneuverable scout and a support tank capable of flanking and firing from its rapid guns. An overhead weapon station and with easy maintenance access and interchangeable cradles for mounting guns of different calibers made it possible to keep the vehicle's weight low while ensuring the required defense capabilities and a high degree of gun elevation / depression. By the time the blueprints were completed, the VZ-71 was no longer required by the military. The scouting vehicle niche had already been filled by other machines. The vehicle's armoring had notably improved. And vehicle armoring had notably improved. A light vehicle without missile armament thus became irrelevant. So, a tank that didn't quite make it, but still has an idea of what it could be, I guess. So, let's jump in and take a look to see what the Tesák looks like. Oh my word, this thing looks very alien / very modern, right? Look at that turret. Bizarre shape on it. Oscillating up, down. Really does look like it's a pretty cool design. Love the flares on the barrel here and on the springs on the front, I guess, to stop kind of like the recoil as much as possible. The hull on the front kind of reminds me a bit of a Batchat. It does look like it's a Batchat. So as Wargaming decided to try and like make a Batchat autocannon here, I'm excited. Okay, so let's take a look to see if this thing is anything to get excited by. The 57mm, is it the same that was on the Šelma? Yes, it is. It's a 535T rather than a 535S. And unfortunately, it's practically identical. The only difference here is the amount of time that it takes to load the magazine has gone down by 3 seconds and a tiny little bit of penetration. And ladies and gents, boys and girls, I can tell you that is very unwelcome because I didn't think that this gun was that good at tier 9, especially with regards to its pen, and the pen has barely gone up. However, one thing that I did notice about this vehicle is that the amount of drop-off that this tank gets is not bad at all. The penetration over distance only goes from 192 down to 178 on its AP rounds, 247 down to 232 on its gold rounds. And so that means that while this tank starts with lower penetration than, for example, other tier 10 light tanks, for example, the Rheinmetall Panzerwagen, we can see that the Rheinmetall Panzerwagen, it loses nearly a quarter of its penetration over 500 meters. Of course, that's not if it's firing gold. And this is not something that's unique to the Rheinmetall. All tier 10 light tanks lose a huge amount of penetration. This isn't something that's the case on this vehicle, however. Sorry, that was when I was meant to get up, but I'm so much of a no-lifer that I'm already up making YouTube videos. This content rush, right? I hope you're all appreciating it. So, I digress. What I was saying is that this vehicle doesn't actually lose that much penetration over distance, so it's going to be actually not too bad at just dumping shells. Wargaming didn't want it to, I guess, be completely useless at long range, but let's be honest, it's an autocannon and the gun's going to spread out massively, meaning that it's going to be better at close quarters combat. Well, considering that the gun is the same, let's hope that everything else about the vehicle is significantly better, otherwise this thing's going to be a disappointment. Okay, so firstly, right off the bat, just checking base values are active. That is staggering damage per minute for a light tank. 2,887 if you're able to pen its AP shells, and if you're able to pen HE shells, 5,700 HE. That is mental stuff. So the damage per magazine is the same. 900, and it's going to take 3.7 seconds to dump it out. And if you penetrate HE shells, that's 1,800 damage that you'll be able to dump out in 3.7 seconds. However, I must mention that considering that the Blesk at tier 8 did 840 in 4 seconds, it doesn't really feel like it stepped up that much, even though we're now at tier 10. And considering the penetration has only gone from 163 up to 192, I think that the tier 8 is going to be a pretty darn nice kind of sweet spot within that regard. And I feel that sometimes damage per minute isn't as useful as just having that big old magazine, because sometimes the opportunities that arise are seldom, and it's all about that kind of ambush opportunity rather than just kind of like reloading and dumping shells. However, on the other hand, I'd like to highlight that a 15-second reload on the magazine is right about the mark of where you need the vision to reset from being spotted. So maybe that means the Tesák can come out, dump out a magazine, although it's going to take 3.7 seconds to do so, go back into cover, and then jump out again just as its vision resets and dump out a magazine. So we might see that this one, when it gets going, it could pretty much get going very rapidly with the way that its damage stacks up. Whereas the Blesk is more kind of like go out, dump a magazine, and then twiddle your thumbs for 20 seconds. Disappointingly, the aim time and the accuracy haven't improved over tier 9, but the gun handling significantly has. However, the bloom after firing is still 3, so the gun is still going to bloom out just as much as it did at tier 8 and tier 9. But that gun handling means that if you didn't have an autocannon, that you probably could get away without vert stabs on this tank. And I'll try multiple builds on this vehicle to see how it feels with and without vert stabs to give you a full opinion in my tank review, so stay tuned to the channel for that. The gun depression on this tank is fabulous at 12 degrees. That's absolutely lovely, and that'll make it very flexible on a ridgeline. Let's take a look to see whether that's 12 degrees all around the tank. So it's 12 degrees pretty much all the way, and then over the butt, it's 10 degrees. So that's still not bad over the back of the tank. But yeah, definitely if you want to have 12, you're going to have to go sideways there rather than stick your vehicle ready to run away from your opponents after you get that ambush mag off, for example. So the mobility on this vehicle, it's a little bit lackluster, isn't it? 65 forwards, but the power to weight ratio is fabulous at 38. Accordingly, I think this might be a really good tank for an experimental turbo, so that you still get a little bit of that top speed increase, and you'll also be able to reduce your bloom after firing a little bit more, which will allow you to dump shells at longer range. However, that you don't need the engine power increase. So the experimental turbo, which doesn't provide that much of an engine power increase, might be really good on this vehicle. But like, just not very fast, really. And also, this thing weighs 17 tons. Ram these things. If you see a Tesák, ram it. Doesn't matter really what you are, ram it, boys and girls. It has absolutely no armor, once again. So I expect that it's going to get penetrated by itself. Yeah, for free. Oh my lord. What will HE rounds do from 50mm against this tank? Wow, the turret's trash. Lower plate's trash. Side is trash. Rear is trash. Yeah, this thing isn't going to be bouncing anything. So, awful armor. Not very good hit points, 1,600. Not absolutely horrendous, but definitely not like a durable light tank within that regard. And then the real stinker here is that it doesn't get 400 meters view range, which again means that even if you set this vehicle up in like a really sweaty way, and you have situational awareness, and you have recon, and you use like vents, and you also use a vent purge, you can still only get to 447 meters view range if you improve the vehicle's camo. So that basically means that a lot of people will have to use coated optics on this tank, or they'll have to sacrifice camo rating to be able to gain view range here. which is definitely not something that you want to have to do. And talk about camo, 15 camo, that is really not good news for this vehicle. And let's actually go and take a look at tanks by stat for all of the moving camo in the game. We can see the Tesák is only marginally better than the Sheridan and significantly worse than the Rheinmetall Panzerwagen. And when we take a look at a tank like the 13105, another one of its autoloader rivals, it's like 20% worse. This thing is going to be a really poor scout at tier 10 compared to its predecessors. And honestly, I question why Wargaming are making this vehicle look like maybe about 10% better in some scenarios on firepower than like a 13105. Significantly worse in other areas. But to just give it that bad camo at tier 10 when it's a light tank and it's meant to be special, oof. This thing, it's not looking good for it, at least with regards to its scouting capabilities. But ladies and gents, boys and girls, I would love for you to subscribe to the channel and stay tuned, as I will be giving you a full tank review / preview, as the test server is a very hard place to actually do any kind of testing of the Tesák. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was it for today. Really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you found it useful and you're now fully prepared for all of the Czech light tanks, yeah, do give the video a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know in the comments down below where you will start for the Czechoslovakian light tanks. I personally, I'm going to play all of them. It's new content. I don't want to rush through it. But I'm really looking forward to trying the Blesk, especially considering that once you get that top gun and you manage to penetrate those AP shells, that magazine could be staggering. I just kind of wish it had that better HE pen like you have at tier 9, because if you had that at tier 8 against tier 6 tanks and against Borasks, boy, that would be pretty savage. Anyway, thank you all very much for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think about the new Czech light tanks. Do you think they look trash? Do you think they look great? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.